For a population of 8 million people, to spend almost $500 million kina on elections is...
The Prime Minister informs Parliament more manageable ways will be devised to deliver the elections next year. University of Papua New Guinea students still firm on their boycott.
Health services delivery.
Health conference told malaria still the #1 killer in Papua New Guinea. Hello everyone, and thank you for joining PNG tonight. Prime Minister Peter O'Neill informed the House today that the elections next year will be delivered. The difference, though, is that it will cost much less, adding more economic conduct of elections have been demonstrated with the successful completion of some by-elections. Mr. O'Neill answered several questions on elections from the Deputy Opposition Leader, Sam Basil. After a brief statement, here are some of Mr. Basil's questions.
Mr. Speaker, my questions are, why did the government decide not to fund the Electoral Commission so the Commission could update and cleanse the electoral rolls? Secondly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, why did the government decide there should be no debate in Parliament on the 2016 budget, which also includes funding to the very important office, the Electoral Commissions? And the third one, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what are the consequences for an honest general election if electoral rolls are not updated properly?
Mr. Speaker, I want to assure this Honourable House that we have already cleared some funding for Electoral Commissioner through the Central CACC. Has already indicated to me that they will be releasing some funds over the course of the next few weeks to start the updating of common rolls all throughout the country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, despite the cuts in the budgets, you can see from the recent by-elections that the Electoral Commission has been able to deliver these elections without any difficulties. In fact, Mr. Speaker, we had to renegotiate many of the budgeted items for each of the by-elections so that we can keep costs down, so that we can be able to deliver a fair election. Mr. Speaker, for a population of 8 million people, to spend almost $500 million kina on elections is unreasonable and not necessary. Mr. Speaker, we need to do more. We need to do a better job in managing our costs, costs that can be able to deliver a fair and free election. Mr. Speaker, I want to assure this Honourable House and of course our country and our people that like in 2012, despite the short preparedness, we delivered a fair and good election, Mr. Speaker. That is why good leaders were voted into this Parliament. And Mr. Speaker, that is why we are able to have a stable Parliament for quite a number of years. Mr. Speaker, that election will be held on time. I think the writs are going to be issued on March, I think, April 24th, I think, and of course returned in July. So, Mr. Speaker, we can assure the Deputy Opposition Leader that we will make sure that the Electoral Commission gets the funding that it requires. But, Mr. Speaker, we are doing things a little bit different. That is that we are telling the Electoral Commissioner not to hire vehicles, unnecessary hiring of vehicles, unnecessary expenses. Instead, we will buy the vehicles so that these vehicles can be used to be given to government agencies at the districts and the provinces after we have finished the elections. Mr. Speaker, that is why we are reprioritizing each expenditure item so that we can deliver the elections in a fair and, of course, reduce costs in 2017. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. What's your point of order?
That's one of my questions. The question is that why did the government decide there should not be debate in Parliament regarding the 2016 budget, which also contains the Electoral Commission's budget that we needed to debate?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think the budget was debated at that time. I know that, of course, we did not give a 1 week's notice as demanded by opposition, but there's no requirement of law to do that. In fact, the good opposition leader made his reply made his interventions on that day, Mr. Speaker, and the budget has been passed by Parliament.
Prime Minister Peter O'Neill also received several questions from the member for Leh, Lujaya Koza, as chairperson of the Leh District Development Authority. She talked on the 2014 Auditor General's report on the distribution and application of DSIP funds. Here are some of her questions.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, my questions now, without notice, are: 1. Should voters be informed of the performance of their members in the district administration as measured by use of DSIP? 2. Should the government now require the Auditor General to undertake an audit of the use of funds in 2014-15 in order to take necessary steps to strengthening governance and administration of those funds? And lastly, will the government apply penalties against members and administrators who are shown to have misused DSIP funds? Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Deputy Speaker, I want to assure the good member that we will look through the recommendations of the Auditor General, and we will ensure that those recommendations that need to improve accountability of the use of DSIP in the districts are improved. And of course, we are concerned if there are instances where there are abuses, it needs to be brought to the appropriate agencies for that accountability to take place. Mr. Speaker, the guidelines are very clear. And I think many of the members in this House will agree that when we had the Leaders Summit in February, the reports that we were getting from the districts, we were able to present how DSIP is working and how provincial service improvement programs fundings are working in the districts and the provinces, was quite evident. Very evident that there is substantial improvement in the way we deliver health, education, infrastructure maintenance, and of course the economic empowering of our people in those remote areas. Mr. Speaker, for the first time in 40 years, we are putting money where a majority of our people are living, that is to the rural communities. First time in 40 years where there was quite an evidence that there was lack of government presence in many of those districts throughout the country. So the 10 million guideline is very clear that 3 million will be spent on education, 2 million will be on health, 4 million kina or so for infrastructure and maintenance, and 1 million kina for the economic improvement of our citizens in those districts. Mr. Speaker, I can assure you, our public and our people are very well aware that each district gets 10 million kina a year and the provinces get PSIP support over time. They will be, of course, all in us accountable for how we manage those funds through the District Development Authority in 2017. Where members have managed well, I'm very sure that the community will support these members to be re-elected into this parliament. But Mr. Speaker, I want to say, just because there are 1 or 2 instances of abuse does not necessarily mean that it is happening everywhere. In fact, the reports that were presented to us at that Leaders Summit was very encouraging, Mr. Speaker. There is substantial improvement in the infrastructure and delivery of services throughout the districts, and I think this is one program that needs to be strengthened. If there are weaknesses in the accountability of some of those funds, of course the Auditor General and the Finance Department must sit down and tighten those guidelines so that we can be able to be more accountable.
The Prime Minister answering questions from the member for Leh, Lujaya Koza, on the DSIP funds. This is PNG Tonight, the ongoing UPNG students boycott after the break.